The secrets to successful strategy execution. A brilliant strategy, blockbuster product, or breakthrough technology can put you on the competitive map, but only solid execution can keep you there. You have to be able to deliver on your intent. Unfortunately, the majority of companies aren't very good at it, by their own admission. Over the past 5 years, we have invited many thousands of employees, 25% whom came from executive ranks, to complete an online assessment of their organizational capabilities, a process that's generated a database of 125,000 profiles representing more than 1,000 companies, government agencies, and not-for-profits in over 50 countries. Employees at 3 out of 5 companies rated their organization weak at execution. That is, when asked if they agreed with the statement, important strategic and operational decisions are quickly translated into action, the majority answered no. Execution is the result of thousands of decisions made every day by employees acting according to the information they have and their own self-interest. And in our work helping more than 250 companies learn to execute more effectively, we've identified 4 fundamental building blocks executives can use to influence those actions: clarifying decision rights, designing information flows, aligning motivators, and making changes to structure. For simplicity's sake, we refer to them as decision rights, information, motivators, and structure. In efforts to improve performance, most organizations go right to structural measures because moving lines around the org chart seems the most obvious solution to changes are visible and concrete. Such steps generally reap some short-term efficiencies quickly, but in doing so only addresses the symptoms of the dysfunction, not its root causes. Several years later, companies usually end up in the same place they started. Structural change can and should be part of the path to improve execution, but it is best to think of it as a capstone, not the cornerstone of any organizational transformation. In fact, our research shows that actions having to do with decisions right from an information are far more important, about twice as effective. As improvements made to the other 2 building blocks, see the exhibit What Matters Most to Strategy Execution. Take, for example, the case of global consumer packaged goods company that lurched down the recognition path in the early 1990s. We have altered identifying details in this and other cases that follow. Disappointed with the company performance, senior management did what most companies were doing at the time. They restructured. They eliminated some layers of management and broadened spans control. Management staffing costs quickly fell by 18%. 8 years later, however, it was deja vu. The layers had crept back in, and the span of control had once again narrowed. In addressing only structure, management had attacked the visible symptoms of poor performance, but not the underlying cause, how people made decisions and how they were held accountable. This time, management looked beyond lines and boxes to the mechanics of how work gets done. Instead of searching for ways to strip out costs, they focused on improving execution, and in the process discovered the true reasons for the performance shortfall. Managers didn't have a clear sense of their respective roles and responsibilities. They did not intuitively understand which decisions were theirs to make. Moreover, the link between performance and rewards was weak. This was a company long on micromanaging and second-guessing, and short on accountability. Middle managers spent 40% of their time justifying and reporting upwards or questioning the tactical decisions of their direct reports. Armed with this understanding, the company designed a new management model that established who was accountable for what and made the connection between performance and reward. For instance, the norm at this company, not usual in the industry, had been promote people quickly within 18 months or to 2 years before they had a chance to see their initiatives through. As a result, managers at every level kept doing their old jobs even after they had been promoted, peering over the shoulders of their direct reports who were now in charge of the project and all too frequently taking over. Today, people stay in their positions for longer so they can follow through on their own initiatives, and they're still around when the fruits of their labor start to kick in. What's more, results from those initiatives continue to count in their performance reviews for some time after they've been promoted, forcing managers to live with the expectations they'd set in their previous jobs. As a consequence, forecasting has become more accurate and reliable. These actions did yield a structure with fewer layers and greater span of control, but that was a side effect, not the primary focus of the changes. The elements of strong execution. Our conclusions arise out of decades of practical application and intensive research. Nearly 5 years ago, we and our colleagues set out to gather empirical data to identify the actions that were most effective in enabling an organization to implement strategy. What particular ways of restructuring, motivating, improving information flows, and clarifying decision rights matter the most? We started by drawing up a list of 17 traits, each corresponding to one or more of the 4 building blocks we knew we could enable effective execution. Traits like the free flow of information across organizational boundaries or the degree to which senior leaders refrain from getting involved in operating decisions. With these factors in mind, we developed an online profiler that allows individuals to assess the execution capabilities of their organizations. Over the next 4 years or so, we collected data from many thousands of profiles, which in turn allowed us to be more precisely calibrated to the impact of each trait on an organization's ability to execute. That allowed us to rank all 17 traits in order of their relative influence. Ranking the traits makes clear how important decisions right away and information are to effective strategy execution. The first 8 traits map directly to decisions right and information. Only 3 of the 17 traits relate to the structure, and none of those ranks higher than 13. We'll walk through the top 5 traits here. Number 1, everyone has a good idea of the decisions and actions for which he or she is responsible for. In companies strong on execution, 71% of individuals agree with this statement. That figure drops to 32% in organizations with weak execution. Blurring of decision rights tend to occur as a company matures. Young organizations are generally too busy getting things done to define roles and responsibilities clearly at the outset. And why should they? In a small company, it's not so difficult to know what other people are up to. So for a time, things work out well enough. As the company grows, however, executives come and go, bringing in with them and taking away different expectations. And over time, the approval process gets ever more convoluted and murky. It becomes increasingly unclear where one person's accountability begins and another's ends. On global consumer durables, companies found this out the hard way. It was so rife with people making competing and conflicting decisions that it was hard to find anyone below the CEO who felt truly accountability for their profitability. The company was organized into 16 product divisions aggregated into 3 geographic groups: North America, Europe, International. Each of these divisions was charged with reaching explicit performance target, but functional staff and corporate headquarters controlled spending targets, how R&D dollars were allocated. For instance, decisions made by divisional and geographic leaders were routinely overridden by functional leaders. Overhead costs began to mount as the divisions added staff to help them create bulletproof cases to challenge corporate decisions. Decisions stalled while divisions negotiated with functions, each each layer weighing in with their questions. Functional staffers in the division's financial analysis, for example, often deferred to higher ups in corporate rather than their division vice presidents, since functional leaders were responsible for reward and promotion. Only the CEO and his executive team had the, the discretion to resolve disputes. All of these symptoms fed on one another and collectively hampered execution until a new CEO came in. The new chief executive chose to focus less on cost control and more on profitable growth by redefining the divisions to focus on consumers. As a part of the new organization model, the CEO designated accountability for profits unambiguously to the divisions and also gave them the authority to draw on functional activities to support their goals, as well as more control of the budget. Corporate functional roles and decisions right were recast to better support the division's need and also to build the cross-divisional links necessary for developing the global capabilities of the business as a whole. For the most part, the functional leaders understood the market realities, and that change entailed some adjustments to the operating model of the business. It helped that the CEO brought them into the organizational redesign process so that the new model wasn't something imposed on them as much as it was something they engaged in and built together. Important information about the competitive environment gets to headquarters quickly. On average, 77% of individuals in strong execution organizations agree with this statement, whereas only 45% in weak execution organizations do. Headquarters can serve a powerful function in identifying patterns and promulgating best practices throughout business segments and geographic regions, but it can play this coordinating role only if it has an accurate and up-to-date market intelligence. Otherwise, it will tend to impose its own agenda and policies rather than defer to operations that are much closer to the customer. Consider the case of a heavy equipment manufacturer, Caterpillar. Today, it is a highly successful $45 billion global company, but a generation ago, Caterpillar's organization was so badly misaligned that its very existence was threatened. Decision right were hoarded at the top by functional general offices located in headquarters in Peoria, Illinois, while much of the information needed to make those decisions resided in the field with sales managers. It just took a long time to get decisions going up and down the functional silos, and they really weren't good business decisions. They were more functional decisions. Noted one field executive, current CEO Jim Owens, then a managing director in Indonesia, told us that such information that did make it up to the top had been whitewashed and varnished several times over along the way, cut off from information about the external market. Senior executives focused on the organization's internal workings, over-analyzing issues and second-guessing decisions made a lower level, costing the company opportunities in a fast-moving market. Pricing, for example, was based on cost and determined not by market realities, but by the pricing general office in Peoria. Peoria. Sales representatives across the world lost sale after sale to Komatsu, whose competitive pricing constantly beat Caterpillar's. In 1982, the company posted the first annual loss in almost 60 years' history. In 1983 and 1984, it lost $1 million a day, 7 days a week. By the end of 1984, Caterpillar had lost $1 billion. By 1988, the CEO, George Safer, stood atop of an entrenched bureaucracy that was, in his words, telling me what I wanted to hear, but not what I needed to know. So he convened a task force of renegade middle managers and tasked them with charting Caterpillar's future. Ironically, the way to ensure that the right information flowed to headquarters was to make sure that the right decisions were being made farther down the organization. By delegating operational responsibility to people closer to the action, top executives were free to focus on more global strategic issues. According to the company, recognized into business units, making each accountable for its own PL statements. The functional general offices that had been all powerful ceased to exist literally overnight. Their talent and expertise, including the engineer, pricing, and manufacturing, were parceled out to the new business units, which could now design their own products, develop their own manufacturing process and schedules, and set their own prices. The move dramatically decentralized decision rights, giving the unit control over the market decision. The business P&Ls were now measured consistently across the enterprise, as returned on assets became the universal measure of success. With this accurate, up-to-date, and directly comparable information, senior decision makers at headquarters could make smart strategic choices and trade-offs rather than use outdated sales data to make ineffective tactical marketing decisions. Within 18 months, the company was working in a new model. This was a revolution that became a renaissance. Owens recall a spectacle transformation of a kind of sluggish company into one that actually has entrepreneurial zeal. And that transition was very quick because it was decisive and it was complete. It was thorough, it was universal, worldwide, all at one time. Once made, decisions are rarely second guessed. Whether someone is second guessing depends on your vantage point. A more senior and broader enterprise perspective can add value to a decision, but managers up the line may not be adding incremental value. Instead, they may be stalling progress or redoing their subordinate jobs while in effect streaking their own. In our research, 71% of respondents in weak execution companies, though that decision, were being second guessed, whereas only 45% of those strong from execution organizations felt that way. Recently, we worked with a global charitable organization dedicated to alleviating poverty. It had a problem others might envy. It was suffering from the strain brought on by rapid growth in donation and a corresponding increase in the depths of breadths of its programs offered. As you might expect, this nonprofit was populated with people on a mission who took intense personal ownerships of projects. It did not reward the delegation of even the most mundane administrative tasks. Country-level managers, for example, would personally oversee copiers' repairs. Managers' inability to delegate led to decision paralysis and a lack of accountability as the organization grew. Second guessing was an art form. When there was doubt over who was empowered to make a decision, the default was often to have a series of meetings in which no decision was reached. When decisions were finally made, they generally been vetted by so many parties that no one person could be held accountable. In an effort to expedite decisions making through restructuring by collocating key leaders with subject matters experts in newly established central and regional centers of excellence become instead another logjam. Managers still were not sure of their right to take advantage of these centers, so they didn't. Second guessing was an art form. The nonprofit management and directors went back to the drawing board. We worked with them to redesign decision-making map, a tool to help identify where different types of decisions should be taken, and with it, they clarified and enhanced decision right at all levels of management. All managers were then actively encouraged to delegate standard operational tasks. Once people had a clear idea of what decisions they should and should not be making, holding them accountable for decisions felt fair. What's more, now they could focus on their energies on the organization's mission, clarifying decisions, right, and responsibilities. Also improve the organization's ability to track individual achievements, which helped it chart new, appealing career advancement paths. Information flows freely across organizational boundaries. When information does not flow horizontally across different parts of the company, units behave like silos, forfeiting economies of scale and the transfer of best practices. Moreover, the organization as a whole loses the opportunity to develop a cadre up of incoming managers well versed in all aspects of the company's operations. Our research indicates that only 21% of respondents from weak execution companies thought information flowed freely across the organization boundaries, whereas 55% of these from strong execution firms did, since scores for even the strong companies are pretty low, though this is an issue that most companies can work on. A cautionary tale comes from a business to business company whose customer and product teams fail to collaborate in serving a key segment large cross product customers to manage relationship with important clients. The company had established a customer focused marketing group which developed customer outreach programs, innovative pricing models, and tailored to promotions and discounts. But this group issued no clear, consistent reports in its initiatives in progress to the product units and had difficulty securing time with the regular cross unit management to discuss key performance issues. Each product unit communicated and planned in its own way, and it took tremendous energy for the consumer group to understand the unit's various priorities and tailored communications to each one. So the units were not aware and had little faith that this new division was making constructive inroads into a key customer segment. Conversely, and predictably, the consumer team felt the units paid only pre-functionary attention to its plan and couldn't get their cooperation on issues critical to multi-product customers such as potential trade-offs and volume discounts. Historically, this lack of collaboration hadn't been a problem because the company had been dominantly player in a high-margin market. But as the market became more competitive, customers began to view the firm as unreliable and generally as a difficult supplier, and they became increasingly reluctant to enter a favorable relationship. Once the issues became clear, though, the solution wasn't terribly complicated, involving little more than getting the groups to talk to one another. The consumer division became responsible for issuing regular reports to the product unit showing performance against targets by product and geographic region, and for supplying a supporting root cause analysis. A standing performance management meeting was placed on the schedule every quarter, creating a forum for exchange information face to face and discussing outstanding issues. These moves bred the broader organizational trust required for collaboration. 5. Field and line employees usually have the information they need to understand the bottom line impact of their day-to-day choices. Rational decisions are necessarily bounded by the information available to the employee. If managers don't understand what it will cost to capture an incremental dollar in revenue, they will always pursue an incremental revenue. They hardly be faulted even if their decision is in light of full information wrong. Our research shows that 61% of individuals and strong execution organizations agree that field and line employees have the information they need to understand the bottom line impact of their decisions. This figure plummeted to 28% in weak execution organizations. We saw this unhealthy dynamic play out to a large, diversified financial services client, which had been built through a series of successful mergers of small regional banks. In combining operations, managers had chosen to separate front office bankers who sold loans from back office support groups who did risk assessments, placing each in a different reporting relationship and in many cases in different locations. Unfortunately, they failed to institute the necessary information and motivation links to ensure smooth operations. As a result, each pursued different and often competing goals. For example, salespeople who would routinely enter into highly customized one off deals with clients that cost the company more than they made in revenues. Sales did not have a clear understanding of the cost and complexity implications of these transactions. Without sufficient information, sales staff believed that the back end people were sabotaging their deals, while the support groups considered the front end people to be cowboys. At year's end, when the data finally reconciled, management would bemoan the sharp increase in operational costs, which often erased the profit from these transactions. Executives addressed this information misalignment by adopting a smart customization approach to sales. They standardized the end-to-end processes used in majority of the deals and allowed for customization only in select circumstances. For these customized deals, they established clear back-office processes and analytic support to arm salespeople with the accurate information on the cost implications of the proposed transactions. At the time, they rolled out common reporting standards and tools for both the front and back office operations to ensure that each group had access to the same data metrics when making decisions. Once each side understood the business realities confronted by the other, they cooperated more effectively, acting in the whole company's best interest, and there were no more year-end surprises. Creating a transformation program. The four building blocks that managers can use to improve their strategy execution: decision rights, information, structure, and motivators are inextricably linked. Unclear decision rights not only paralyze decision making but also impede information flow, divorce performance from rewards, and promote workarounds that subvert formal reporting lines. Blocking information results in poor decisions, limited career development, and a reinforcement of structural silos. So, what to do about it? Since each organization is different and faces a unique set of internal and external variables, there is no universal answer to that question. The first step is to identify the source of the problem. In our work, we often begin by having a company's employees take our profiling survey and consolidating the results. The more people in the organization who take the survey, the better. Once executives understand their company's areas of weakness, they can take any number of actions that exhibit mapping improvements to the building blocks. Some simple tactics show 15 possible steps that can have an impact on performance. The operation listed represents only a sampling of a dozen choice managers might make. All of these actions are geared towards strengthening one or more of the 17 traits. For example, if you were to take steps to clarifying the streamlined decision making, you could potentially strengthen two traits. Everyone has a good idea of the decisions and the actions for which he or she is responsible, and once made, decisions are rarely second guessed. You certainly wouldn't want to put 15 initiatives in a single transformation program. Most organizations don't have the managerial capacity or organizational appetite to take on more than 5 or 6 at a time. And as we've stressed, you should first take steps to address your decision rights and information, and then design the necessary changes to motivators and structures to support the new design. To help companies construct an improvement program with the greatest impact, we've developed an organizational change simulator. To help companies understand their shortcomings and construct the improvement program that will have the greatest impact, we have developed an organizational change simulator. This interactive tool accompanies the profiler, allowing you to try out different elements of a change program virtually to see which ones will best target your company's particular areas of weaknesses. For an overview of the simulation process, see the sidebar, test out your organizational transformation. To get a sense of the process from beginning to end, from taking diagnostic profilers and formatting your strategy to launching your organizational transformation, consider the experience of leading insurance companies we'll call Goodward Insurance. Goodward was a successful company with a strong capital reserve and steady revenue and customer growth. Still, its leadership wanted to further enhance execution to deliver on an ambitious 5-year strategic agenda that included aggressive targeting in consumer growth, revenues increase, and cost reductions, which would require a new level of teamwork. While there were pockets of cross-unit collaboration within the company, it was far more common for each unit to focus on its own goals, making it difficult to spare resources to support another unit's goal. In many cases, there was a little incentive to do so anyways. Unit A's goals might require the involvement of Unit B to succeed, but Unit B's goal might not include Unit A's support. The company had initiated a number of enterprise projects over the years, which had been completed on time and on budget, but these often had to be reworked because stakeholders' needs hadn't been sufficiently taken into account after launching a shared service center. For example, the company had to revisit its operational model and processes when units began hiring shadow staff to focus on priority work that center wouldn't expedite. The center might decide what technology applications, for instance, to develop its own rather than set priorities according to what was most important to the organization. In similar way, major product launches were hindered by insufficient coordination among departments. The marketing department would develop new coverage options without asking the claims processing group whether it had the ability to process the claims. Since it didn't, processors had to create an expensive manual work arounds when the new kinds of claims started pouring in. Nor did marketing ask the actual department how these products would affect the risk profile and reimbursement expenses of the company, and for some of the new products, costs did increase. To identify the greatest barriers to building a stronger execution culture, Goodward Insurance gave the diagnostic survey to all 7,000 plus employees and compared the organization's score on the 17 traits with those from strong execution companies. Numerous previous strategies, employee satisfaction among others, had elicited qualitative comments identifying the barriers to execution and excellence, but the diagnostic survey gave the company quantifiable data that it could analyze by group and by management levels to determine which barriers were most hindered by people actually charged with execution. As it turned out, middle management was far more pessimistic than top executives in their assessment of organization execution abilities. Their input became especially critical to the change agenda ultimately adopted. Throughout the survey, Goodward Insurance uncovered impediments to execution in 3 of the most influential organizational traits. Information did not flow freely across the organizational boundaries. Sharing information was never one of Goodward's hallmarks, but managers had dismissed the mounting of anecdotal evidence of poor cross-divisional information flows as some other group's problem. The informational diagnostic data, however, exposed such plausible deniability as the inadequate excuse. In fact, when the CEO reviewed the profiler's results with his direct reports, he held up the chart on cross-group information flows and declared, "We've been discussing this problem for several years, and yet you always say that it's so-and-so's problem, not mine." 67% of our respondents said that they do not think information flows freely across divisions. This is not so-and-so problem, it's our problem. You just don't get the results that low unless it comes from everywhere. We are all on the hook for fixing this. Contributing to this lack of horizontal information flow was dearth of lateral promotions because Goodward had always promoted up rather than over and up. Most middle and senior managers remained within a single group. They were not adequately apprised of the activities of the other groups, nor did they have a network of contacts across the organization. Important information about the competitive environment did not get to the headquarters quickly. The diagnostic data in subsequent surveys and interviews with middle management revealed what was wrong. The diagnostic data and subsequent surveys and interviews with middle management revealed that wrong information was moving up the organizational chart. Mundane day-to-day decisions were escalated to the executive level. The top team had approved mid-level hiring decisions. For instance, the bonuses of $1,000 limiting Goodward's agility in responding to competitors' moves and customer needs and changing in broader marketplace. Meanwhile, more information was so heavily filtered as it moved up the hierarchy that it was all but worthless for rendering key verdicts. Even if low-level managers knew that a certain project could never work for highly valid reasons, they would not communicate that dim view to the top team. Non-starters not only started, but they kept going. For instance, the company had a project underway to create new incentives for its brokers, even though this approach had been previously tried without success. No one spoke up in meetings or stopped the project because it was a priority for one of the top team members. No one had a good idea of the decisions and actions for which he or she was responsible. The general lack of information flow extended to decision rights as few managers understood where their authority ended and others began. Accountability, even for day-to-day decisions, was unclear, and managers did not know whom to ask for clarification. Naturally, confusion over decision rights led to second-guessing. 55% of respondents felt that decisions were regularly second-guessed at Goodward. To Goodward's credit, its top executive immediately responded to the results of the diagnostics by launching a change program targeted at all three problem areas. The program integrated early, often symbolic, changed with longer-term initiatives in an effort to build momentum and galvanize participation and ownership. Recognizing that an passive-aggressive attitude towards people perceived to be in power solely as a result of their position in the hierarchy was hindering information flow, they took immediate steps to signal their intention to create a more informal and open culture. One symbolic change: the seating at the management meetings was rearranged. The top executive used to sit in a separate section. The physical space between them and the rest of the room fraught with symbolism. Now they intermingled, making themselves more accessible and encouraging people to share information informally. Regular brown bag lunches were established with team members of the C-suite, where people had a chance to discuss the overall culture change initiative, decision rights, new mechanism for communicating across the units, and so forth. Seating at these events was highly choreographed to ensure that a mix of units was represented at each table. Icebreaker initiatives were designed to encourage individuals to learn about other units' work. Meanwhile, senior managers commenced the real work of remedying this issue relating to information flows. Meanwhile, senior managers commenced the real work of remedying these issues relating to information flows and decision rights. They assured their own they assessed their own informal networks to understand how people making key decisions got their information, and they identified critical gaps. The outcome was a new framework for making a more important decision that was clearly specified who owns each decision, who provides units, who must provide input, who is ultimately accountable for the results, and how results are defined. Other long-term initiatives include pushing certain decisions down the organization to better align decision rights with the best available information. Most hiring and bonus decisions, for instance, have been delegated to immediate managers so long as they are within pre-established boundaries relating to the number of hired and salary levels. Being clear about who needs what information, it's encouraging cross-group dialogue. Identifying and eliminating duplicate committees, pushing metrics and scorecards down the group level so that rather than focus on solving the mystery of who caused the problem, management can get right to the root cause of why the problem occurred. A well-designed scorecard captures not only outcomes like sales volume or revenue, but also leading indicators of those outcomes, such as the number of customer calls or completed customer plans. As a result of the focus of management conversation has shifted from trying to explain the past to charting the future, anticipating preventing problems, making the planning process more inclusive. Groups are explicitly mapping out the ways their initiatives depend on and affect one another. Shared group goals are assigned accordingly, enhancing middle management career path to emphasize importance of lateral moves to career advancement. Goodwood Insurance has just embarked on this journey. The insurance had distributed ownership of these initiatives among various groups and management levels so that these efforts don't become silos in themselves. Already, solid improvements in the company's execution is beginning to emerge. The early evidence of success has come from employee satisfaction surveys, middle management responses to the question about levels of cross-unit collaboration and clarity of decision making have improved as much as 20 to 25 percentage points, and high performers are already reaching across boundaries to gain a broader understanding of the full business, even if it doesn't mean a better title right away. Execution is a notorious and paternal challenge, even at companies that are best at it. What we call resilient organizations, just 2/3 of employees agree that important strategic and operational decisions are quickly translated into action. As long as companies continue to attack their execution problems primarily or solely with a structural or motivational initiative, they will continue to fail. As we've seen, they may enjoy short-term results, but they will inevitably slip back into old habits because they won't have addressed the root cause of failure. Such failures can almost always be fixed by ensuring that people truly understand what they are responsible for and who makes the decisions, and then giving them the information they need to fulfill their responsibilities. With these two building blocks in place, structural and motivational elements will follow. The details for this example have been taken from Gary L. Nelson's and Bruce A. Pasternak's. Results: keep what's good, fix what's wrong, and unlock great performance.